sometimes I have this spat with my own audience about what like we are talking about as the denominator of like winning or being effective. And there are some people who are like internally who won the debate has to do with like who sounded the most convincing to that individual. And there are others who are like, of the audience, how many people are you able to convince? That's the metric.
I might be coping, but I say it's an internal sense of judgment. But this is a 3,000-year-old problem. Socrates and Aristotle, they had all sorts of criticisms of the sophists because the sophists of ancient Greece effectively said, hey, I will teach you rhetoric and you will be able to manipulate the masses in order to achieve the goals that you want.
There are good demagogues, there are good propagandists, there are good rhetoricians. I don't take that to be coextensive necessarily with like a good debater.
I agree with you. I think Donald Trump is a horrible debater. One of the most successful demagogues in American history. But I don't think he's a particularly good debater. I don't think he follows substance or logic or...
That's what I mean,
also,
though.
I think he's blown out a shitload of times and he just acts like it didn't happen.
Hey, folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description.
One of the things that keeps frustrating me about everybody who's hanging out in the Crucible space is because I talked to Cooley or Koozie the other week. I talked to, I've seen a few Andrew Wilson debates that I've watched recently. And I got to say, one of the most annoying fucking tactics that I see these guys do over and over and over again is declaring victory after like every single point. They're like, oh, I just made such a good point. I just blew you the fuck out. And it's like,
I just started doing that, by the way. So you can come at me, bro.
Well, no, I'll call you out too. But for me, like, I have to say, my frustration with that is like, okay, number one, you should be confident enough in your points in order to let them stand. But then number two, it basically tells me that you think that part of your audience are fucking idiots, where like they're just going to go like, oh yeah, he blew him out on that one. But like they don't even understand the arguments. They're just like vibing off of the emotions of the conversation. They don't even understand what's being said.
How I do it sometimes isn't as a way to signal to the audience. It's a way to get them to address what I'm saying. So I'll give you an example that just happened on Live and Learn. We were talking about ways in which the Democratic leaders are either being successful or
Were you attacking Hutch or Josiah?
It was Hutch. And Hutch was like, well, Schumer and them are doing really good because, look, they're keeping their party together and their unity within the coalition this time. And so I am like, wait, so are you saying that they were failing back in March when they weren't able to keep their coalition together, when they were divergent views in the House versus the Senate, and then the Senate, it was like a bunch of defections in the Senate, they were failing then? And he wasn't letting me finish the point. And so sometimes they'll say, you're getting crushed, that's why you're not letting me finish. And so I do it as a way to
That's
get
what she
someone
said,
to
by
engage.
the way.
What did I just say? Did I just say I'm fucked? What did I say?
No, I said that's what she said because you said, you're getting crushed, that's why you're not letting me finish.
All right, you fucking disgusting piece of shit degenerate.
Yeah.
So I will do that sometimes to get people to engage. And also there's a debate I just did with the distributist guy. I don't know who, a friend of PF Young.
I hate that guy with every fiber of my fucking being.
Well, you might hate this discussion. But anyway, that conversation was another instance when I'm like, you're getting creamed on this point, and that's why you're not addressing it. So I'll use it to try to get under their skin to get them to actually engage in that part of the discussion by making them insecure about how they're coming off. That is just something I'll do when I'm pushed to the absolute, like, you're not letting me finish this point.
My only concern with that is, and by the way, like, no, I don't know if anybody should take my advice on rhetoric. I pretty much just autistically say what I think to be true, and that's what I've been doing for 5 years. But what I would say is my only concern with that is I think when you over-engineer the rhetoric or you over-engineer the psychology, I feel like people can vibe on that, basically, where they don't feel like you're actually having the conversation. You're trying to, like, manipulate the conversation to a certain end, but that doesn't matter. Like so, for instance, like with the distributist in particular, probably maybe 5 years ago. I don't know if you remember a guy named Faraday Speaks, but there was a guy named Faraday Speaks. He was actually my introduction into the Twitch and YouTube political debate scene.
No, I don't remember.
And I asked him, I was like, hey, who do you know on the dissident right who could kind of break it down for me, like what the factions are and their philosophy are? And he was like, oh, I could hook you up with a distributist. So distributist and I had like a private call.
Oh, wow.
Where he tried to walk me down like the logic of the dissident right, but he wanted me to agree with like every one of his precepts before he would move into like any prescriptions or descriptions. And I didn't even want that. I just wanted him to tell me what a fucking groiper was. And he was like, so we have mass immigration with brown people with like a 75 IQ, right? And I'm like, I guess.
Yeah, no, I found a very similar vibe at times in my conversation, and you guys will see it, those guys in the chat, when it comes out. PF Young structured the conversation as like, I don't want to have a debate. I'm purposely, he said this in both DMs and he was open about it, so I'm not revealing anything, but because he led with it, he said, I purposely did not have a proposition because I don't want it to be a debate. I want it to be a conversation. But right out of the gate, he comes out with like, you are equivocating, this and that. So like, I feel it.
Yeah, so it changed modes instantaneously.
Yeah. And I'm happy to do the kind of more generic conversation.
Was Young hosting and Distributus was not the opponent, but the other conversationalist or whatever?
Yeah, but like, yes. But if he's coming out of the gate, and you guys, again, you'll see it with you're equivocating or you're using a word to try to get people to have targets on their back, fascism again. Oh, that's a conversation when there's an accusation like that. I'm gonna defend myself, man. And if that turns, on like,
I'm just trying to take over the government in an authoritarian fashion, so I can deport all the Browns and denaturalize all the Muslims and deport them as well. I'm not a fascist. How dare you call me that dude? That's the other thing that rubs me like so wrong about every single one of those guys is they're like, oh, you're using the F word. You're trying to get me killed, and it's like, wait, hold on, what are you trying to do again? And they're like, we want Donald Trump or somebody like him to be a new dictator and king so we can denaturalize and deport all the people who are ruining America. And it's like, why wouldn't I call you a fascist? What the fuck?
Well, and it's so funny because they don't want to have a conversation about what a term means. And it kind of reminds me a lot of the conversation we had about communism and socialism, where at the end of the day, there's a lot of like, there's this notion about like what a term ought to mean. And they're like, fascism ought to mean this very, very, very narrow thing. And then it kept building, and where I got the sense that it's not just fascism he wants to do this to. For democracy too, he's like, democracy only means this kind of Athens style popular vote on everything, and
direct democracy
stuff, right? And I just don't have that kind of normative view on like words and what they ought to be. And I kind of use words to get at different concepts. And it's a little weird for me to deal with so many people in so many conversations where they profess not to care about semantics. They profess to be exhausted by conversations about what words mean. But at the end of the day, that's where all of their argumentation seems to lie on, is like, your definition is too broad. That was true of insurrection. That was true of the term fascism. And it's true of the term, I think, frankly, communism. Now, if you want to use it in a specific academic or technical sense, which I understood Conor, you to be advocating for, I can understand that, and we can just like shift the dialogue to conform to your meaning of that word. But there seems to be a resistance to acknowledge that some versions of the word are broader than the one that's sort of at issue.
I'm okay with just acknowledging that there's like colloquial or lay uses of the word, and then there's like probably like a hyper specific like sociological, or even you could add some of these definitions are so private they might as well be like private language, right? Yeah. Like what's so funny is that a lot of people, so I always use political corporatism and flexible authoritarianism as my definition of fascism, because I've seen like half a dozen fascist philosophers articulate Giovanni Gentile's ideas, and I've had that fleshed out for me. So as a result, like fascism to me actually has like a pretty like specific definition. But if you just wanted to say like I'm using fascism as right-wing authoritarian, then I would just go, okay, let's go with that for the sake of this conversation.
If that's true, then X, Y, Z, yeah. But they don't seem to be willing to have that that convo, like accepting what you mean by fascist. And you can have a debate about what the right meaning of the term is, but then you're just gonna have to reference. The problem is a lot of the times the usage isn't on their side. At least with insurrection, you can't point to a definition either in the dictionary or in legal history that says an insurrection is exclusively an attempt to try to overthrow the country's authority. It's
my favorite one, I don't know if I saw it from you recently, but my favorite one, it was either Rob or it was somebody like Rob, but they were using insurrection for the BLM stuff.
Yeah.
Then they were sweeping for the Trump stuff. Then they started using the insurrection stuff for the ICE stuff. Yeah. And I was like, bro, like you can't. You can't have this like definition that applies to all three incidents where you're interrupting the government function, but you only use it on two, but not when your side does it, which is absolutely batshit.
That's what's useful.
I don't know if it was Rob, by the way, but it was somebody like Rob for sure.
And I want to be clear. I've bitten the bullet that some of the conduct in the ICE and certainly in the BLM stuff constitutes legal insurrections. But all I say there is...
But isn't it because you're interrupting a government function or something? Like isn't that a component of it?
It depends. For the legal definition, it is an assemblage. So a public, it can't be like, it needs to be two people together publicly. Can't be like a private, one person assassination who comes out and like shoots you, right? Like it needs to be at least two people who are for a public purpose. So not just someone who, let's say, is going to Jan 6 to, I don't know, to steal money from the Capitol, right? Or to steal products because they want to sell it. That wouldn't be considered a public purpose.
Nicolas Cage from whatever that National Treasure movie.
You need to use force or intimidation. And intimidation here, not just causing fear, it's intending to put someone in fear of imminent harm, imminent actual physical harm. So that's like using the legal definition of intimidation. And then finally, to resist a law for the purpose of resisting a law, any law of the United States. So that can encompass quite a broad set of conduct. And the reason we do that is because we have all of these historical cases of insurrections that were called legally insurrections that, for example, where they were obstructing a tax collector from getting taxed. So a bunch of people went to the tax collector's home to resist the enforcement of these like hated taxes and to like drum him out of the town. That was considered an insurrection. Insurrection, John Brown's attack on Harper's Ferry, when he was trying to get all the slaves to revolt against the white people, that was an example of an insurrection because they were resisting, the enforcement of the fugitive slave law and the other, related state laws, using force and intimidation for a public purpose. And so all those historical definitions, the whiskey insurrection, among others, those inform the definition, the pre-existing definition of insurrection that was developed before the Civil War, right? The term insurrection was applied to the Civil War because there was a concept of insurrection before the Civil War. The concept of insurrection did not originate in the Civil War. And so that's why it's broader than what these people say. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll respond, the invitation that someone like Rob or Andrew will do, Andrew Wilson, is to say, well, insurrection just means this very, 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 very narrow thing because it ought to mean that, but they can't rely on any dictionary, on any usage, on any legal case whatsoever to come to that decision.
God told me so.
Right. Yeah. And really, that's why they don't offer one.
I've seen it. No, I've seen it half a dozen times now, and I know Andrew can throw elbows, so I'm not saying that he can't leave the God told me so argumentation, but I've seen it used haphazardly, randomly in the Crucible orbit, where they're like, well, do you believe in God? And then you're like, no. And by the way, I'm like a deist or whatever, but let's say that for the sake of the argument that I say no. Then they're like, oh, well, you don't believe in anything anyway. So all words are arbitrary to you because you don't even get your sense of purpose or direction from the creator of the universe. And I'm like,
yeah, but between you and me,
does that have to do with what we're talking about?
No.
But I've seen them invoke it like a dozen times.
Between you and me, Andrew Wilson has gone on record, said he won't debate me, and it's because I think, exactly to your point, that I've actually done my homework on these presuppositional debaters who say the only grounding to the rules of logic and to objective reality is the triune God. Like, I know all of these Darth Dawkins talking points, and I know all of the fallacies entailed by this notion that existence itself presupposes a creator, and they've taught this script to all of these different Christians who've bought it, these presuppositional debaters. And I think that Andrew Wilson realizes the fallaciousness of this reasoning, and that if you were ever to push me on quote unquote objective morality, or that he would get crushed.
Well, I'll kind of share. I'll consider it like a half L, but it was so obnoxious that it was kind of it was almost like farcical on its face. So I was talking to Cooley or Kuzi or whatever that guy's name is, the No Fugazi podcast guy, and we were supposed to be debating people in the military. And I brought up institutional homosexuality, where I was like, well, in prison and other places, if you ban females and there's an increase in homosexual behavior, then he's like, I don't believe you. And I was like, wait, what? Why? And then he was like, and he was like, because homosexuality, like human beings are created like perfectly. And therefore, if any of them engage in any homosexual behavior, then it's clear that they were like molested as kids. And I was like, wait, how would I even disprove this? And then he's like, so therefore, if somebody goes into prison or goes into the military and they're not around females for a long time and they engage in homosexual acts, then they were always homosexual. And so it was this thing where it's like, I could look up statistics. I could look up biology. I could look up like, non-human biology. I could bring up like a dozen other, variables for why, homosexuality exists outside of this like very narrow logical frame that Fugazi fucking does. But because he has this very narrow logical frame, if I try to drag him out of the logic chain on any variable, all he does as soon as I'm done talking is he drags it back to the logic chain and then just repeats this logic chain. It's like one of the most annoying ways to have a conversation I've ever heard.
I'm black-pilled and convinced that half of this is obscure tactics, trying to obscure using tactics which are hiding meaning in different vague words. So for example, you just said he believes humans were created perfectly. What does that mean, perfectly? Like, what do you actually mean by the term
like God
perfectly?
made us in his image, the creator of the universe, when you say perfect, ordained every single thing that was, will, or ever will happen.
So right. So when you say perfect, you mean in God's image. That's what you mean by perfect, in God's image. And then once you get clarity on those terms, everything starts to fall apart. So if man were made in God's image, is God susceptible to homosexuality in the way that man is? Because man is made.
And then he would say, "Oh, well, no, that's our free will, and that's the corruption of the world." And
right. So and then so is God open to corruption? So all of a sudden, the moment you start to get clarity on these terms, like spooky terms that are invoked, like I said, triune or perfect or epistemic, this kind of stuff spooks a lot of people and they get scared. But like, I think a lot of what's doing the work is equivocation and vagueness, really lack of clarity on what the terms are, like the most important terms in these arguments are.
Yeah, and that's my frustration too. So I was talking about this with my chat today. It's like I have always win, lose, or draw. I've always like debated to understand, right? So yeah, like I'm gonna have my position. I'm gonna advocate for my position, and especially if I think I'm right and I think you're wrong, then I'm gonna hammer my points and I'm gonna criticize your points, right? But what I'm ultimately like, if there is something that is proven wrong within the debate, or if there is a flaw or a vulnerability in my logic or historical analysis or whatever, then number one, I'll probably be thinking about it after the debate. But even in the debate, just for the sake of just trying to tell truth as much as possible, if I find out that I'm wrong, I might just concede within the context of the debate that I'm wrong. But I think that a lot of people, because they specifically debate to win, they will make, like, it's kind of like the is it Roy Cohn who said this or whatever, which was like, deny everything, accuse them of that which you were guilty, or whatever his like 3-sentence phrase is. But it's like, deny everything, make counter accusations, and something. But it's a way to rhetorically always be on offense, and I think a lot of people are like that.
I totally agree. I think a good example of this, frankly, on the same train of insurrection, is, I don't know if you saw Destiny's debate with Andrew Wilson on the term insurrection. And there were a lot of, he came in, he was like,
you have the positive claim.
Right.
You must back up your positive claim. I don't have to make a dispositive claim. And he wasn't arguing to win or arguing to establish truth. He was arguing to not lose rhetorically.
Right. But like, people will say, well, he came into that debate with an agnostic position, whatever. There was a certain point in the discussion, though, where Andrew says the following. He says, the definition you provided, which was this Graeber definition of insurrection, backed up by the historical text, etc., this definition better fits the term riot. The minute Andrew Wilson said that, he must have been making a relative statement, right? Like, it's better, this term, this meaning of the term is better for riot because I have a self-standing notion of what the actual definition for insurrection is or ought to be. In what sense could something be better unless you had some notion of what riot and insurrection actually were to make a comparison. You would need to have some referent for both those terms in order to make the comparative claim that the meaning of that you've provided is better for one versus the other. It means it's meaninless to say, for example, something is better than something else in some respect without knowing like the composition of that
the
statement,
qualities
right?
through which you're evaluating
Right.
them.
So
that's
the kind of bullshit. But he still clings to it and still kept pushing. I came in with an agnostic position. I don't need to have a definition. But the minute you say something like, this is better for this other term, you're now putting that into issue and you're making a separate claim.
Yeah, you have to know, you have to have some internal sense of what these two things are in order to be evaluating them.
Correct.
Which is also funny because then that kind of unroots you from your your logic chain going all the way back to God. But that's where, for me, what I think is so funny about this like logic chain, Darth Dawkins argumentation. I didn't even know it was from Darth Dawkins. But this whole line of argumentation is like a lot of Christian philosophy or Christian analysis of the world. It's rooted in like logos, like specifically like the spoken word and the spoken truth. And so what you're supposed to be loyal to above all else is the truth. But what I find so funny about this line of argumentation is to what you were saying is like, it's not meant to go after the truth. It's meant to like effectively obfuscate through argumentation what's really going on and then drag, no offense to anybody who falls for this line of argumentation, but drag as many morons who don't know what's going on as possible to be like, oh, well, I see his logic chain all the way back to God through his argument about homosexuality. Therefore, because he has point A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K leading to why homosexuality is bad, therefore he's correct. But they don't even analyze whether or not any of the subcomponents are correct.
And it's all based on
they just see the chain.
I agree. And it's all based on the fundamental assumption. This is an assumption. You might say an axiom or assumption or whatever, that you're unable to make any claim justifiably unless you believe in the Christian God. Like there's this unjustifiable belief posited by some of these new Christian nationalists, whatever type people, that absent a creator, absent a some kind of initial cause or ultimate cause, a person cannot make, in some sense, I don't know what cannot mean, but like is not justified in making any kind of statement. And it's just laughable and baffling that people would still cling to that when
I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people think that Jordan Peterson is a quack, but one of his anti-realist arguments that I thought was pretty like it's a very personal argument, but I still think it's a good argument. He was like, oh, you don't believe in reality. And this reality doesn't require a God, by the way. You don't believe in reality, try denying pain. And then that can feel like kind of trite. But what I mean by, or what he means that, or at least what I'm inferring, is if I took 100 humans, and this is going to show how psychopathic I am, but if I took 100 humans into a room and I had like razor blades and lemon juice, I could make them acknowledge the existence of pain. 100 out of 100 of them, unless there was some like something medically wrong with them, right? Like they had that like rare disease that makes it so you can't feel pain, or they were comatose, or they were on drugs or some shit. Like you can prove the existence of pain to almost every subjective creature who's ever existed ever. So there has to be, with or without a God, some reality that we are all, relatively speaking, sharing experientially. And you should start there.
What they'll say though is like you can't justify that you're not a brain of that. You can't just. But then all you have to say to get I think that there are certain experience, like a subjective experience at all. That's the kind of, I don't know, Cartesian.
Listen, if they said they're a brain in a vat, I was like, come on over. I got razor blades and lemon juice. We'll see if we're a brains in vats. I'll see if I can get you to deny that you're a brain in a vat. Let's go.
You can just respond to that by saying, hey, any claim that I make about how reality works from a quote unquote objective sense is indexed to or relative to an assumption that of the linearity of time, of the uniformity of causation, of the fact that my senses appear to work and the reality is as it appears. And as long as you say my truth claims take as an assumption those like, I don't know, basic core stipulations, I don't know, axioms, then all of your, there's nothing else to say. Yeah, I am taking as an assumption that reality is what it is, and the uniformity of causation, all that stuff. All that, it totally takes the wind out of the sails of these presuppositional type debaters, they actually suck. When you actually get down to the nuts and bolts, they run, they flee from these conversations, and that's why ultimately I think Andrew Wilson will never ever debate me, because I know those tricks, and if you know those tricks, you'll never not see them. You'll never not see them in operation.
I'm worried though. Maybe I don't share your confidence. The reason why I don't share your confidence is because I think that will be a good debate, and for anybody who's not bought into whatever this line of logical argumentation or whatever, I think that argumentation would probably do quite well. However, I still think that just because of like the political climate that we're in, on a 2-to-1 basis, I think you would break people away from the bullshit. I still think 1 out of 3 people would break his way. And then not just that, the people who are already bought into kind of like the audience or the cult or whatever, the political tribe, I don't think they would go anywhere. But I think that's more of like a function of people looking for a political tribe that's strong with which to belong. I don't think that has anything to do with like the quality of the arguments.
Yeah, sure. So let's talk about that a little bit, because we started with the Rob Noerr stuff, and I had some observations on that whole thing. The first is,
well I just want to share this observation one more time before we move on to it, because it's the key one that I took away was before that, admit nothing, deny everything, make counter accusations. That was like the Roy Cohn quote. But in reference to Rob, I just want people to understand this. What he said multiple times is that if he is not allowed to gish gallop for between 2 to 5 minutes, laying out a dozen points uninterrupted, then that's bad moderation. If you interrupt him at point 2 or 3 in order to challenge him on any of his points, then you're actually being like a rude asshole who's not worth his time. And I just can't believe that those words came out of a man who came out of Twitch and YouTube politics. I can't believe it came out of his fucking mouth.
He has a different perception of how much time I think people get. There are some times that I do think that, like, though I will say that the moderation, some of these moderators, man, I was saying this in my chat earlier, and I personally like most, if not all of the moderators, because I just find them affable behind the scenes and all that stuff. But there's like a power trip that some of these moderators, have you seen this? That sometimes people...
Well, everybody gets it. Prime goes a little hard sometimes. Wick goes a little hard sometimes.
Yes.
Dylan used to throw his weight around. But dude, do you know where it comes from though? It comes from fucking herding cats all the time. That's what it comes from. You get sick of herding cats. So eventually you're just like, shut up, listen to me.
Something about being the moderator of a panel though, I think maybe it is the herding cats and the frustration. And it's, like I said before, a thankless job. But there's also there's like a feeling I get that there's a bit of an ego trip sometimes. Not all the time. I'm not saying in every part of their life, but sometimes
it's
when they
clout.
Do you think it's clout?
No, it's 100% clout, because even let's say that you're like a shitter panel host and you only get like 100 views yourself or whatever. But at the same time, you talk to and relate to a whole bunch of clouded up people who are successful in this field. And then you can create content that's good for everybody, that involves all of these clouded up people smashing their audiences together. Then yeah, I think it probably does fuel an ego to some degree.
Yeah. And so I want to talk about that real quick in the context of what happened with Rob. My take, first of all, is that it was a funny bit of a freak out. And there are 2 big takeaways, I think. The first is, I think Rob has a little bit of a point to the moderation stuff. But B, the response, which was to cancel Sarah Tomato, Andrew Wilson canceling his work with her, based on this, that to me, like, can you explain that? Talk me through that, because that is just, to me,
yeah, dude. Well, hold on. So talking through it, I still need to watch the Andrew Wilson bit. That's probably what I'm going to watch tomorrow. If I had to guess though, this is just out of my ass. So Dylan was the Twitch and YouTube panel debate scene for a long time. He just was. When he disappeared, there was a power vacuum. And that power vacuum tried to be filled by a few people, Prime, Wick. There was the one that was before the Crucible and before Raging Tomato. Do you remember what that was? That was run by the blonde chick, but it got overrun with Nazis and they got banned.
Wait, no, not Pondering. Holy shit.
Pondering politics.
Politically provoked. Politically provoked.
But politically provoked, in my opinion, was like a prototypical version of Raging Tomato. A lot of the aesthetics are the same. Blonde chick, red stuff, Crusader art, like all this random like conservative
Nazis hanging
touchstones.
out.
But I think what ended up happening was she got distracted, Brittany from Politically Provoked. She got distracted by the Nazis and let them suck her down a rabbit hole that ended up destroying her channel. I haven't even heard of Brittany from Politically Provoked in probably a year or two. I'm sure they still exist, but I don't think they reach out as far as they used to. So I think that Sarah, just from like a very limited experience, I think she's astute enough to not let the egos and the clout of various creators who are propping up her channel drag her along. But I think Andrew sees that there's such a big overlap in audience between Raging Tomato and between the Crucible that if he wants to throw his weight around and try to get her to bend the knee, then he can throw his weight around that way. And by the way, the way that Andrew was talking and the way that fucking Rob was talking about the scenario, dude, I'm just going to say it. In my opinion, their egos are out of fucking control. Way out of control.
Yeah, when he was like, I'm better than all these people. I am. I've proven myself in the realm of debate. I mean, to some extent, he's debated. I think he has this sense that he's this like awesome S-tier debater. I don't share that sense. And
no, I don't.
It's a bit of an overreaction, to be honest.
I don't. No, I don't either. Okay. The reason why I don't either is because the S tier, I hate to say it, but the S tier, which I hate to say that Vosh is a part of it, but Vosh used to be a part of it.
S tier,
whatever. No, I'm not even saying skill wise. Okay. Oh. We should talk about skill versus rhetoric versus charisma. We should talk about the subcomponents. But I think that if you're cream of the crop going to rise to the top no matter what, you don't need anybody, right? You're just gonna get there. But I think that it kind of similar. I don't want to put you in the same boat as me. I think but basically what I would say is the way that I've built an audience is through slow, gradual, going to different places, debating different people. Not everybody likes what I have to say. Not everybody likes my rhetorical style, but I chip away half a dozen people, dozen people, half a dozen people, dozen people, and then that's added up to around 100 to 300 people depending on the day.
We should just be clear, and so that clear about what we're talking about. So because sometimes I have this spat with my own audience about what like we are talking about as the denominator of like winning or being effective, and there are some people who are like internally who won the debate has to do with like who sounded the most convincing to that individual, and there are others who are like, of the audience, how many people are you able to convince? That's the metric. So is the metric a kind of internal reflection that you make subjectively about who did best? Or when you're talking about like who's the best debater, is who is able to convince the audience? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, I might be coping, but I say it's an internal sense of judgment but this is a 3,000-year-old problem. Socrates and Aristotle, they had all sorts of criticisms of the sophists because the sophists of ancient Greece effectively said, hey, I will teach you rhetoric and you will be able to manipulate the masses in order to achieve the goals that you want. And their criticism of those people was effectively that like rhetoric without virtue is like poison to the soul of a community.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I think there's like good demagogues. There are good demagogues. There are good propagandists. There are good rhetoricians, people who are able to convince others.
You mean good as in talent or good as in they promote virtuous behavior?
Good as in able to convince people of their demagoguery, of their propaganda, and of their, various different forms of rhetoric. Like they're able to convince people. I don't take that to be coextensive necessarily with like a good debater. I think a good debater, when I think about a good debate, is like the argument. Right?
I agree with you. I think Donald Trump is a horrible debater. One of the most successful demagogues in American history. One of the most an exceptional sophist, an exceptional vulgar rhetorician, I guess is the way that you would put it. Somebody who's able to like play the vulgar and like carnal instincts of human beings. But I don't think he's a particularly good debater. I don't think he follows substance or logic or.
That's what I mean.
I think it's blown out a shitload of times, and he just acts like it didn't happen.
That's why I agree with you that it's an internal judgment or some kind of other reference standard, because if it were just you're able to convince people, that's how we judge a good debater, then it's like, well, whoever has the most clout, I guess by definition, is the best debater because they just have a bigger audience that they are able to or I don't know, they have more opportunities to convince
I think you should
people.
analyze both. I think it would be the same thing. Like if you were analyzing an artist, right? There are probably hundreds of thousands or millions of artists that are great, like vocalists, or they play guitar really well, or they play an instrument really well, or they're even a part of like a really good band that made some really good music. But a lot of them, their albums are totally unheard because they don't have the marketing and they don't have the business and they don't have the this and the that. So I think that you can concede that any artist or any talented person, it's not just whether or not they're good at the thing, it's whether or not they can let other people know that they're good at the thing. And so these are effectively like almost like two different talent trees. And I think that the most successful people, there's people who are wildly successful in one place but not in the other. Then there's people who are successful at both, and I think those are the most amazing people on the planet. And then there's people who are wildly talented but they're not good at the marketing. And then that's where I think there's a lot of people who have died disappointed in the fact that they felt like they had the stuff, but they never broke it big.
I just want to say thank you for the raid from Aaron, Straight Raid, favorite communist raider. Really appreciate it. Okay, on to the actual what's going on here. Do you think that it's okay, or do you think it's right for Andrew to drop Sarah Tomato in response to her being like, this is what happens when you mess with the panel verse. This is, Rob giving him unsolicited advice, etc. His argument, I guess, would be, I can't trust her.
Logically. Yeah. I understand it logically. I think it's a little bitch made. That's my. I think it's a little weak. I think it's a little pussy, being like, "Oh, you bullied one of my teammates. I'm not going to work with you anymore." And it's like, I'm sorry. I thought this was the debate scene. What the fuck? What are you talking about?
Here's the argument, though. Like, I need to be able to trust people, and I can't trust her because she's shit talking and being like, I don't know, snaky to my friend.
Well, wait, sorry. She shit talked to you in the open for behavior that you engaged in the open? Yeah. No, I think that's bullshit. I think it's different if somebody is shit talking you in DMs to other people and yet they're smiling to your face. I don't think it's snaky at all to shit talk somebody in public. Like that. That's not backstabbing. That's front stabbing.
I think the context matters a bit.
Stabbed more.
If I went on like Crystal and Kyle, and I said, I know this guy Conor, and he always has the worst arguments. So I just keep him around because, yeah, I think you would take that if I'm talking shit to Crystal and Kyle or to in some other forum, and kind of using you as a punching bag in a way that where it's people you're unfamiliar with or who don't have an impression of you already. What do you think about that? I think it depends. Well, I mean, even if it's in public.
I think the correct move would be, well, fuck you, say it to my face, and then not just so that's our relationship. Now, as far as like Crystal and Kyle, let's say that I had some like aspirations of like clout climbing over there or whatever. I think that's what it really is. Okay, I think that's what it really is. It's the clout climbing. And the reason why I say that is I don't know how many live Sarah gets. I really don't, but I have to assume it's a few hundred. I know Rob, somebody was telling me that he kind of peaks out around 300 or something like that. I don't know if he's gotten bigger since then, just because he's up with the Crucible. And then Andrew's been at like 5K. So in my opinion, Andrew, while not necessarily as big as Destiny or as big as Hassan Piker, he can throw his weight around like that because anybody's going to, even if you hate a motherfucker, you're going to want to get onto a 5K stream. Now, the thing about that is, though, how do you wield that power? And if you're going to be like, oh, you have to kiss the ring in order to get on my 5K live view stream, I think anybody with balls should say, fuck you. Like I think that's what anybody should say is like, fuck you. I'm not gonna suck your dick so I can go onto a 5K viewer stream. Like fuck that. And I hope that's Sarah's position, by the way. I hope Sarah says, yeah, okay, you guys don't want to hang out in the debate scene anymore? Go fuck yourselves. I'll go make my own content. She might take a hit, but I hope she has the balls to say that.
Yeah, I also think that there's people don't want me to say this. I think that there's a gendered aspect to this as well. And
sure.
I'm going to say it because if this were, let me think. What is she accused of doing? Sending some unsolicited advice and laughing along with some people who are trolling Rob, right? What's the
Yeah,
big
that could be a
faux
little
pas?
gossipy, but I don't think I'm sure Prime and Wick have done similar things.
Like if someone were yucking it up with people who are like trolling, like I interact on Live and Learn with Soy Pill, who kind of trolled Rob a little bit when he lied to him about something. I forget, like calling out Democrats or something. But I guess Rob doesn't talk to me anymore, or doesn't want to unless it's solely and exclusively on his terms on his stream. So I don't know. I feel like there's some lines here where I'm not sure that this would be seen as serious if it was taken in the nature of good faith ribbing. But maybe it's the fact that there was like lies being told and intentionally driving trolls to the channel. That kind of feels maybe to them.
Okay, but then I would want to get into specifics, even though I don't really care about the specifics. So for the specifics, did Sarah herself say some lie or whatever, or were people just fucking with Rob? And she was like, ha 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 ha.
I don't think that she's accused of lying. I think that this guy Dusty, who was in my who's in my chat, was accused of like trolling him or lying about something he said at some point. And
listen, we're big boys and big girls, okay? And if you do the guilt by association shit, you're not going to talk to anybody. That's one of my things too. Is you by proxy are friends with Soy Pill. I'm sure Soy Pill said something edgy in the past month. Oh, my pearls, they're so clutched right now. You know, and that's the thing. It's like the second that you stop dealing with the sins of the individual and you expand it out to the sins of their proximate, you're going to find endless excuses not to talk to anybody ever. And that's what I'm probably going to call it, the fucking Rob Noerr fucking Fortress arc. Because by the end of the stream or whatever, that's what I was convinced he was saying. He was saying, oh, I'm only going to engage with people that I feel like engaging with, which is effectively Vosh's Fortress arc.
But it's also, it seems like redundant to say. I assume already that you're only interacting with people that you want to
he's
or
pissed,
interact with.
and there's an expectation of being a part of the debate scene, and he's getting invitations right now. But you know,
did you see when he blew up on me? So we were like tweeting at each other or something, and I like couldn't do a debate right then in that moment, and there were like multiple moderators.
Like, you need to come right now, and you were like, I'm on a train, bro, or I'm like on a car or something.
I was either traveling. I was traveling to another state for either for like a wedding or to go on to, I think it was a wedding actually. And I clipped up one of his things, and I'm sitting like in the quiet car or whatever, and or I don't know if it was the quiet car, but it was quiet, and there were like families nearby. And also, I don't want to do a debate with you, Rob Noerr, while I'm on the fucking train. But even then, like, it feels like there's a little bit of an escalation in not just in the Fortress arc, also in like the way that he's engaging. And a lot of these right wingers engage with the left. I've just recently got blocked by Jack Posobiec, by Will Chamberlain, by a bunch of other, like Mike Cernovich, these different types of people. They don't want to do these debates anymore. And when they do interact, it is so vicious. Compare a debate I had with Rob Noerr.
It's Charlie.
2 years ago. You think it's Charlie? I think
Charlie.
it happened before Charlie.
Maybe, but I think Charlie's the excuse. Regardless of whether or not it is Charlie, Charlie's the excuse. So the excuse is liberals don't really want to talk in good faith. Liberals don't really want to negotiate anything. Liberals don't really want to do this. Liberals don't really want to do that. But just as an example, I mean, if you go on Twitter right now, and Twitter sucks so bad now, man, it's so bad. But it's such a useful tool, I can't quite delete it. If you look at like the No Kings protests or whatever, what was it, like estimated between like 3 and 7 million people participated? But you know what I'm seeing on every conservative's fucking feed?
It's all
it's
fake.
The one chick.
Yeah.
It's the one chick pointing to her neck and being like flicking off like some conservative. And then it's also I think you mentioned the communist booth where it was like Charlie Kirk deserved it, change my mind or whatever. Those are the two pictures that I've seen over and over and over again. And so effectively what they're doing is they're saying politics is a binary. You're either on our team or you're not on our team. The other team wants to kill you. And if you don't recognize an existential threat from Biden to all the way to Hassan Piker, maybe even further than Hassan Piker, if you don't recognize Biden to Hassan Piker as an existential threat, you're not on our team. And that's what they're doing right now. And I think it's wildly fucking dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I credit the conservatives who are still out there trying to have these discussions, but I just feel like they're less and less and less. And the Charlie thing, I think, is being used as a pretext to be like, they wanted to kill him and they did this. And, you want to debate now. You should have thought of that before you killed Charlie Kirk, you guys.
Yeah, and it's like I didn't shoot Charlie Kirk, bro. Like I didn't. Like I thought Charlie was cringe. I would talk shit about his talking points. I don't think him being dead turns him into like a modern saint. But I didn't shoot Charlie.
I didn't shoot him, and I didn't want him to be shot. But at this point, there's little hope, I think, of convincing them of that. There are people who probably don't give a fuck and were glad that he got shot. I'm not denying that, but and so if someone takes a position that I don't want to have a conversation with people who want me dead or something, I guess I don't really.
But that's where I think it's almost more important, though. So I don't think that you should have to bend the knee or suck up to like Andrew Wilson or Rob Noerr to get a conversation. There's plenty of other creators. What their names are, I have no idea, but there are other creators, and I think that it's probably more important for center left people, center right people to go into right wing spaces and go into MAGA spaces, because we're looking at 26. What's the economy going to be like in the midterms? And then we're also looking at 28, where I think that Donald Trump sabotaged his own possibility of a military coup. My belief that we were going to have a military coup dropped from less than 1% to like 0.00001%. I think he pissed off all the people that he would need for a military coup. So I think that's I think that's gone. But then it becomes a question of like, who succeeds Trump and what does that look like?
I'm all for going into MAGA spaces. It just feels like they're closing them off.
Yeah, but then that's why I'm saying that's even more important, because you don't want these people in a hug box, because they are a self-radicalizing hug box.
Yeah, it's a bit wild. I don't know what it is, a kind of like epistemic. There's a divergence here that they just live in a separate universe than we do, and in their mind, they like are totally convinced that the reality that they occupy is, well, at least some of them. I think the grifters and the influencers, that they might be a little bit more knowingly deceptive, but in general, yeah.
I think January 6th, though, January 6th, 2021 is like the perfect example of trying to rationalize what happened, but then just hitting, landmine after landmine after landmine in conversation. Because like, okay, you start with Donald Trump tried to steal the election and through January 6th, 2021. And then they're like, no, he didn't. The false elector scheme was done in Hawaii. And then you're like, okay, well, in Hawaii, it wasn't outcome determinative. It was 3 electoral results, and the people who submitted a different state of electors or whatever, they ended up being vindicated through the recount, which is why they weren't charged with a crime. So in like half a dozen variables, this is not equivalent to trying to steal the election. But then they go into like, oh, well, there's all these irregularities with mail-in voting. And did you know that half a dozen states violated their own constitutions for mail-in voting? So then you start arguing about mail-in voting. Then once you get them past mail-in, and so on and so forth, it's a series. It's not even a Mott and Bailey. It's like, I forget what the more defensive fortification is. I think it's the Mott. But basically it's like Bailey, Mott. And you can never get to the Mott because they just throw up so many Baileys. And it's fucking impossible. It's an impossible conversation.
I'm used to these kind of like endless double standard conversations where everything means everything and words. For example, another example that I want to talk about are the narco terrorists that were shooting with.
Oh, but we let 2 of them go.
That was so wild. I just want to address something in the chat real quick. They say this channel is dog water. What an echo chamber. I invite, and the whole thing that we're talking about right now is,
get on, nerd.
Yeah, like we want to talk to people who disagree, and like my frustration that they don't want to do debate. So if it's an echo chamber, it's not one of my own creation. I really encourage people who disagree to come on and talk to me. But last thing I want to talk to you about, and then I'll let you go. And thank you for chilling. This narco terrorist strike stuff. So for background, those of you guys who aren't aware, we are engaging in like regular airstrikes on vessels that are purported by the government to be belonging to narco terrorist groups. And the latest update is that, well, 2 updates I think are of relevance. One is the Colombian president alleged that one of the people killed was an innocent like fisher, and then that we had actually arrested or apprehended 2 people who were on these ships, survivors, and let them back into their countries of origin. And so my response to that is like,
without criminal charge
without
or
any charging, right?
incarceration.
Like, if there was terrorist actions directed by these individuals at the United States, they should be charged in an American justice system. And then number 2, even assuming that it's the case that these individuals are trafficking drugs into the United States, I don't think that that's a grounds to use airstrikes. I don't know where the president derives the authority to summarily kill like a bunch of people in the middle of the ocean for drug trafficking.
Yeah, that's one of my frustrations, and this is my frustration with the so-called gun rights libertarians who have been worried about like an authoritarian government for so long, is that right now, as far as I know, the war on terror, you can criticize the war on terror endlessly, but the war on terror was at least predicated on AUMFs, so authorizations for use of military force that were done by Congress. And I think the one that was written in 2001 basically said that anybody who was affiliated with Al-Qaeda, anybody who was close to Al-Qaeda, anybody who was similar to Al-Qaeda, the president has authority to take out. I don't know what the AUMFs were, or if we had AUMFs for like Libya or for Syria. I would be curious about that. But the point is that the war on terror, relatively speaking, had some level of congressional approval. Whereas with this, I think that what happened was effectively like an organization through executive fiat, where Trump took DOJ, DHS, I don't know who, but he took one of the organs of the executive body, had them declare Tren de Aragua and a few other gangs as foreign terrorist orgs, and then just use the label of terrorism as a pretext with which to kill these people through the military means with which we fought the war on terror. And if you want to talk about a slippery slope or the Patriot Act or any of the shit that libertarians were complaining about for the past 20, 25 years, this is it.
Takes the cake.
Not only that, not just that, designating Antifa
as
an international terrorist organization,
yeah.
a foreign terrorist organization. That is like, this is like the, what is it? The people who wear the masks, I forget, the white masks for like the British Revolution. I forget, the Guy Fawkes
masks. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, this is like, this should be the revolutionary anti-federal government militia members' wet dream of the abuse of federal power. And yet they're not only silent about it, they're cheering it on.
Oh,
they're borderline complicit.
They absolutely love it. And it's a lot of the times the same arguments that the initial generation of Republicans fell for from the neocons, which is they're terrorists. I say that a lot of them are the same people. They were convinced, I guess, that they're no longer able to fall for those neocon tricks, but it's the same exact shit. And then even beyond that, separately from that,
they were complaining about the tricks for the past 20 years. How are you ignorant of the tricks when like they took a stick with a piece of like a candy on it and they held it in front of you for the past 20 years and they're like, oh, you're making me walk in that direction because there's a stick of candy tied to a string over there. Like you're never going to give me the candy. And then they move the stick of candy over here and they're like,
the candy, yeah.
Like, fucking crazy.
The minute the government says terrorist, what is their response when you're like, hang on, this is not right? What, you're on the side of the terrorists? What, you're on the side of the drug traffickers? What, you're on the side? And it's the same exact playbook. It's a strong playbook. It works. And that's what they're trying to do. Additionally, from a powers perspective, this is why the Trump versus United States hypotheticals that people were giving about absolute immunity for these hypothetical foreign strikes by the president were on all fours, because we were basically suggesting that one of the core powers of the president, which seems to be firing missiles at individuals in foreign areas, that is a place for where the president can't be scrutinized. And so many of us who criticized the decision kind of lambasted for having these irresponsible double standards. What kind of person would you be to think that the president would engage in this kind of like warfare against individuals who don't deserve it? That I think has been shown to be a concern worth emphasizing, and one where there's no limiting principle on this foreign terrorist organization designation stuff, where if the only thing that distinguishes the justified use of force abroad versus unjustified use of force abroad is what the government designates. You're basically just saying, I'll agree with whatever the government does no matter what. And if Trump designated Democrats as a foreign terrorist organization, you'd be okay with the Trump administration from a legal perspective, like bombing any Democrat abroad.
I've seen, I hate to use people on Twitter as an example, but I've seen people on Twitter say, oh, Antifa is just the militant wing of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party should be declared like a criminal organization on par with the Italian mob. And I'm just thinking to myself, it's like, this is exactly how you usher in fascism. This is like 100% how you do it. And I think there's a meme that I like to retweet every now and then, and it's a Ukrainian soldier in like the first 6 months of the war. And he's like, we are so lucky that they are so fucking stupid. And that is the only thing that is saving us right now. Because I think that Donald Trump is effectively like a dog chasing cars. I do think that he has Christian nationalists, Christian theocrats, dominionists, probably like philosophical fascists who are unapologetically and unrepentantly either a part of his administration or trying to capitalize on the chaos of his administration to seize power for themselves. However, I think Trump himself is basically a dog chasing cars. He doesn't know what he would do if he ever caught one. And so since he's dealing with like Charlie Kirk assassination, peace deal with Hamas, negotiations
building
with Putin,
a ballroom, destroying the East Wing.
Right. And so since he's just chasing 20 different goals all at the same time, he doesn't really do any of them that particularly well.
Yeah. I'll close with this. I kind of agree that he is not as engaged in some of these issues, especially on some of these foreign issues. It really feels like he's just saying and agreeing with the last person he talks to, whether it's on Ukraine, Russia, Israel. There, it seems like a lot of it that's being driven is by the personal familial interest with Qatar and that kind of stuff, and the potential monetary benefit to engaging in that.
Which, by the way, I don't rescind anything I said about fucking Hunter Biden, but can you talk about spit? Can you talk about spit in the ocean? Can you talk about spit in the ocean? Dude, what is it? The Trump family has doubled their net worth in the past year through crypto.
Yeah.
Listen, man, everybody's like, oh, nobody really cared about Hunter Biden. No, I genuinely cared. But where are the other people who genuinely
they didn't care?
cared?
They never cared. They convinced themselves
I think
perhaps
my
that they
naivete.
cared. But the reason they cared is they hated the Bidens, and that's why
they hated
cared.
Democrats.
They
hated Democrats.
They didn't care about the principle.
My naivete sorry, I'll let you wrap up and we can wrap. But I was just going to say, my naivete that I'm going to keep falling for the rest of my life is I keep believing that when people say things that they mean what they say. And then I make the mistake of believing that they mean what they say. And then they make me look like an asshole repeatedly. But I would rather try to have a truthful world than just like give in to total nihilism.
Yeah. And I think that I try to ignore some of the I think sinking reality that I have, which is that the people don't care about principles when I actually engage in these conversations and just try to have the formal debate occur on the supposed issue and on some notion that people have principles. But when you step back, you realize none of this shit really matters to them. They just care about owning the libs and owning the Democrats. Last thing I'll say.
Well, hold on. Let me ask you a question though, okay? Because this is what I found interesting, and this is where I can't get a read on Tim Pool. So maybe I'm a fucking idiot. But at this point you've spent more time with him than I have.
Sure, yeah.
So what I noticed because I've done 2 debates on with Tim Pool. What I noticed, which I thought was interesting, in the first conversation that I had with him, was even though he was instinctively, arguably, based off of his political temperament, he should have been with the opposition, he actually steelmanned me, argued with the other side, entertained weird hypotheticals, and kind of like played with all the ideas that we were having fun with. And I was like, oh shit, Tim's like insightful and playing with different ideas. And he seems to be, fucking with these ideas in order to see where he lands. But then I just kind of get on the same thing that we're talking about right now, where if you cared about Hunter, I could probably go find 1 billion Hunter Biden corruption tweets from Tim Pool.
Yeah.
Where the fuck is the consistent principle? And so is he lying? Is he delusional? Is he self-delusional? Is it just about the show? I have no fucking idea. I genuinely have no idea.
I have mixed feelings about him. On the one hand, I think that there are some like areas of particular interest to him that he genuinely does have interest in. So he'll talk about something and seem hyper fixated on a particular aspect of an issue. And I think that a lot of the time that comes from a place of genuine interest. I also think that he's hyper aware of his audience and he wants to grow his business. And I think that that means that he absolutely is aware of the double standard and the insane shit that Trump is doing, and has either convinced himself that somehow it's different or that it doesn't matter for whatever reason. And he'll even, the thing is, I would say that it's dishonest. That is my inclination. But he comes out and says it in my conversations with him. He's like, who cares about these principles? I only care about whoever agrees with my worldview and whoever's going to who more aligns with me. So how can I call him dishonest?
That's where I
if
feel
he
like
just
this...
says that, right? He's like, I am not here about everyone is broken. We live in a broken society, and the only thing I care about is bettering society for my worldview and my takes.
I swear to God, this is like a post-liberal, pseudo-fascistic perception of power. And I think oftentimes they'll be like, oh, well, the left believes in this too because of Saul Alinsky and politics is for power and all this shit. They'll actually cite a book by Saul Alinsky that's almost exclusively about rhetoric. But then for me, it's like, wait, hold on. We complained when we were younger. I think I'm older than you. We complained when we were younger about the old generation and how they were a bunch of liars and manipulators and deceitful twats and how they did this and they did that and they should return to the principles of the republic and this, that, the other. Well, there's no other adults in the room. We're the adults in the room right now. So the game gets determined. The game is played the way that we decide to play it. So if he's self-deluding or if he's saying well, fuck principles, well, that's kind of he's setting the tempo considering he's in the position that he's in right now.
Yeah.
I guess you're saying he's in a precarious.
I think
he's in a precarious position where he might lose his power if he started playing with principles.
I don't think that Tim Pool is terribly intelligent, but I think he's savvy. He's conscious of the fact that he exists and depends on an ecosystem, which in a sense it's audience capture and in a sense it's power worship. And I think that he convinces himself of the other stuff and pushes himself to the extent that it's not conscious deceit to get to those other positions. The one thing though is I don't know how much personally in our interactions I can accuse him of deceit when he's outright saying, I don't care about principle. I only care about this, and that. And you could take a step back and be like, well, that's itself a principle or something. But I just mean that he doesn't adhere to apolitical standards that apply evenly. He's adhering to standards which by their nature are unbalanced with respect to political partisanship, which in their nature are heavily discounting the corruption of MAGA, etc. And so if he's honest that he doesn't really give a shit about principles, is it active deceit? I think in a way it still kind of is, but
right, yeah. If he's like, no, your team bad, my team good.
Yes,
and fuck
he
your
will
team.
literally say that, and at least I respect that at a bare minimum. When people try I respect him more than what Rob does.
We should wrap just for the sake of momentum,
keep going.
But well, I was going to say that's what I don't respect about Gavin McInnes in your guys' conversation.
Oh, really?
And one of the things that I thought was hysterical during your conversation was probably about 20 to 30 minutes into the debate that you guys had that was live. You were pressing them repeatedly on Epstein.
Yeah.
You were like, they said they were going to release it. Why don't you care about this? Why aren't you pressing the admin? Why are you guys being hypocrites about this? And then what ended up happening, and then when they joked about it, you were like, oh, all you guys have is jokes. You actually have nothing. And then Gavin unironically said, he was like, well, if Donald Trump had sex with a bunch of, underage teenagers,
he said this.
he was like, And then I was like, oh my God, like this is like the conservatarian libertarian branch of the right wing. These are the wood chipper people. These are the people who are constantly like, let's find every person who's ever engaged with anybody under the age of 18 and let's feed them to a fucking wood chipper. And this guy just comes out and he's like, yeah, well, if Donald Trump, did the shit that I would normally want to feed people to wood chippers for, who gives a fuck? And it's like, whoa, like that should be a huge and stunning admission, but because they've bought into the political tribalist game, it has no effect.
Yeah, I almost respect that more. I think I'd have to think about it. So, for example, he's done this. Gavin McInnes did it. Rob recently did it on the when he said he was a hypocrite. But usually, Rob will do this whole thing where he's pretending to uphold some standard that he applies evenly. That pisses me off because it's just very obviously not true. Someone else who said it was Ron Coleman, Trump's lawyer, who I debated. He goes, I would not call out my side because it's my side. And so when people are telling you that they're shills and that they won't call out their own side for bad stuff, I almost respect that more, in the sense of at least they're upfront about it. At least they're not having this pretense that they're applying some neutral standard and just coming out a different way. Now, someone who I think is trying in good faith to do that, but I disagree with a lot on, is this guy. Oh my God, I'm not remembering his name. He's the gay Republican guy. What's his name? Someone help me. Holy crap.
Wait, hold on. Is it the guy Brad fights everybody?
Yes, no, it's Brad Palumbo. So Brad Palumbo, I don't agree with him on where he ends up everywhere, but I do believe he's genuinely trying to be objective in how he addresses different issues. Even though, I don't agree with where he ends up. I think that someone like... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, with Brad, I almost see like a kindred spirit where, he will say the unpopular thing for his political tribe if it's correct. But then I also look at it where, Democrat criticism, Democrat criticism, Democrat criticism. And it's like, 10,000 likes, 500 retweets or whatever. And then it's like Republican criticism and it's like 200 likes. And I'm just thinking to myself, isn't that kind of how a weaker person would mind fuck themselves into political tribalism, where they just see that they're throwing red meat to this political tribe over and over again, and they're like, why am I going to take an algorithmic hit? Why am I going to take an income hit? Why am I going to take a clout hit in order to be honest?
What you're describing is the kind of the perverse incentive structure that is true of new media people as well. Like, there are absolutely like conflict of interest in old media and these old donors, the old way of doing things, these boardrooms, etc., where top down, there are perverse incentives that come from like whoever is running these various newsrooms, etc. But for content creators, they have this incentive structure to never call out their whatever audience that they've developed. And it's a trade-off. The trade-off is, I think, credibility and money, attention, and potential opportunities. Now, that I think is a trade-off that's often worth having. So I appreciate that there are times that I've taken positions, for example, on Merrick Garland, on Biden's pardons, et cetera, that my audience hates. They hate my position on that stuff. Similar thing when I criticized aspects of Ethan Klein's lawsuit, when I criticized aspects of whatever the communism discussion that we were having, where my audience, who I don't think is typically inclined to be socialist, a lot of crossover with more liberal channels, and who really don't like a lot of the Hassan types, they see my actions there as a betrayal of that group, that in-group. And that costs me in terms of like subs, clout, costs me in terms of revenue, all that stuff. But I do think that I am investing in credibility. I'm investing in...
that's specifically what I was going to say, is that I think one of the... People can accuse you of being abrasive. People can accuse you of being hyperbolic sometimes. People can accuse you of a half dozen sins. I don't think one of the sins that they can accuse you of is not willing to stand on shaky ground by yourself if you think it's correct. And so that's one of the things that, I mean, I've seen you do it 5 years ago, whenever we first met or whatever, or 3 years ago, whenever we first met. I've seen you do it 2 years ago. I've seen you do it 1 year ago. I've seen you do it 6 months ago. If you think you're right, then you're basically going to tell the whole world to go fuck itself. And I think that's...
I know. I do. I think you do that too, and I appreciate when you do that for sure. And
It's uncomfortable, but I would rather live that way.
yeah, and today, for example, I've been kind of shitting on Schumer and Jeffries a bit. If I were behaving perfectly in like a clout-based positioning type of way, I wouldn't be coming out as hard as I am on Schumer and on Jeffries. I'm not gaining a bunch of clout by shitting on Democratic leadership in the way that some of these other content creators do, right? Because some of these other content creators, their entire audience and brand from a left-wing perspective is built on the Democrats are inadequate, the Democrats are inadequate, the Democrats are inadequate. That's not where my bread is buttered. My bread is buttered in the vote for Democrats, they're way better than Trump, Trump sucks side of the coin. So,
but you're trying to spur action or spur a sentiment of action.
Yeah, it's what I actually feel. And so yeah, I guess I hope that there are people in influence that, I doubt it, I'm too small, but I hope that there are people of influence who are taking and really being thoughtful about who the leaders are in Congress and what they're doing in Congress. But at the end of the day, I'm just like saying what, but that could undermine, by the way, like, is Hakeem Jeffries or Schumer ever going to give me an interview? Not that they would, right? Like, I'm too small, but like in a future world in which I've shown myself to be a little bit hostile.
Yeah, as a staffer, just going to feed them clips of you talking shit about them.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing where I think truth, regardless of whether or not we agree on what the truth is, I think truth has a value to itself, like our perceived truth. And then also, I think there's something to be said for spurred criticism. So I love Josiah. I'm not criticizing Josiah. I consider Josiah a friend. But if I had to criticize his content, it does seem like it's the Brian Tyler Cohen Midas touch, Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad, Democrats good, Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad shtick, which, by the way, God bless him. And I'm so happy that he has enjoyed the success that he's had. But from like a friend perspective or whatever, I would want to see him throw more elbows. But then I kind of leave that up to you, because I think your personality is more built for that.
Yeah, no, I think that he occupies a kind of a different role where when I'm I kind of feel sometimes like the attack dog on these different panels that we do and these different shows that until he is stepping down from Live and Learn. I don't know if you heard about that yet, but he
I might be watching that I'll probably be watching the Andrew Wilson thing, but I might be watching some of that tomorrow as well.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if it gets spicy or not, but
near the
I
end
think
it gets a little bit debatey.
We should probably pay honor to another another tent pole or another another well, not just a fallen member, but I know Live and Learn didn't really take off like a rocket ship, but I did think that it was a good home for the political discourse of. What's that?
It's still going. The show's not over.
No. Yeah. I'm not trying to mourn the show. I know the show's still going. But I'm saying, like, it's not okay. So Josiah has like 600K subs or some shit like that. I forget.
There's not a lot of overlap between his the people who watch
his pre-recorded and his live.
Yeah.
But for the live or whatever, I still felt like even if it's a quote unquote smaller space, that space is a good incubator because I feel like it's the actual conversations that are going on between more lefty people, more progressive people, and more liberal people, and it's kind of the fights. So it's not the talking points of each political tribe. It's actually the tension between the political tribes.
Yeah, no, I think that there's the tension. A lot of the tension is real. Now we don't take it personally, but like we get into it. And if you watch the end of that, like Hutch is coming at me, IRI's coming at me, I'm coming at them. But with respect to Josiah specifically, there are times when I feel like I'm saying Schumer's not made for the moment. He has no riz. He's too old. Jeffries has shown this or that, et cetera, et cetera. And then Hutch or IRI or someone will push back on me a little bit. And then Josiah will just like quietly be like, yeah, I kind of agree with Pizza on this point. And so I do feel that Josiah, and this is not a dig at Josiah, he is thoughtful about leveraging his relationships in a way that I think he is focused on shitting on Trump and withholding a lot of his critiques of left-wing people. And that is a kind of that causes him to get a lot of tension, I think, friction sometimes with Hutch, because Hutch is not so similarly inclined, especially with specific reference to the lefty part of whatever the political spectrum.
I was going to say, an ideal content creator would probably be between you two.
Yeah.
But I am happy that for the tension between you two, because obviously, like, lefty infighting, number one, is always fucking entertaining. It's always funny. But then number two, I would say that just in this specific topic, I'm obviously more in Hutch's camp. But I also understand that the Democrats are in a pretty tough position where you have to build this coalition of socialists, soc dems, progressives, liberals, neocons, all that kind of stuff. And so the question is, not only how do you build this coalition so it actually congeals when it comes to 26 and 28, but also where do you target your outreach? Do you target your outreach to the far left because they're a large bloc and they didn't, vote last and they feel disenfranchised by the current political environment? Or do you reach out to the center right because they're getting currently shit on by Trump, but they're also fickle. So if you reach out to them and you say one thing that they don't like, then they're going to be like, oh, well, fuck you, communist, I'm out. And then they disappear from the coalition. So that balance of trying to build the coalition, I'm not envious of. And I do think it's a necessary conversation.
I think it's interesting you put that because it makes me think about it. And in a sense, we're all very politically similarly aligned, everyone on that show even. Maybe there's some minute differences. And the disagreements have to do with like rhetoric, with who to outreach to and who to build bridges with, et cetera, and like how for Democrats to be strong. And this is the perception. I don't agree with it, but this is the perception that I think is out there. The perception is, I think, that Hutch is more interested in maintaining and building relationships with mainstream Democrats who are currently in power. That I'm more interested in building and maintaining relationships with lefty content creators. And that Josiah is interested in maintaining both. That's what I think the perception is. Now, I don't think that that's true because I think I just say what I feel. But I can understand why that tension, because where there's this perception, I think not true, that I'm more worried about sullying my relationship with lefty content creators I don't even know, except for like Aaron, right? And where Hutch is like very interested in making sure we're not shitting on Schumer, et cetera, that from that can be drawn out these kind of interesting divisions among people who are very similarly ideologically inclined. It's a kind of fight for the direction of the, not that I'm saying that this is like important, but it's, I think, indicative of dilemmas that are facing liberals and Democrats.
But dragging this back to Rob, though, this is something that a healthy chunk of people have given me shit for, but I don't care because I think it's just descriptively true. So what I said in a debate or a conversation where people are like, oh, Destiny's a bad guy, why do you hang out with him? And it's like, well, number one, I've known the motherfucker for 5 years. Number two, we've had plenty of debates. We have a friendly relationship. We've hung out in person a couple of times, et cetera, et cetera. But then also, I think I just admitted this. I just said this. I was like, but also, like, we have a fun relationship, a fun professional relationship. And if I wanted to do everything by myself, then it would take me 5 to 10 years in order to build what I want to build. But if we have conversations, we have debates, then he could help me build it faster. Now, they took that as like a raw Machiavellian vine, climbing on a different structure, parasitic comment. But what was so funny about the Rob thing is that he said, almost identically the same shit in reference to the Crucible. He said Andrew. Almost like he was like, oh, I'm a ride or die for Andrew, I'm just a little shitter, and Andrew, I was in a rough spot, and Andrew picked me up and took me out of the dirt, and he showed me loyalty. Therefore, I'm going to show him endless loyalty. And it's like, bitch, you're the same as me. You're the same as me. And by the way, here's the other thing that I don't like when people are like, oh, wait, so you're saying that you have relationships not just because of friendship, but also because of professional stuff. What was the other thing? It's like, if you're not engaged, in my opinion, if you're not engaged in the realm of political commentary where you're trying to grow so you have a bigger impact on the political commentary scene, or if you're not interested in participating in the electoral process by having as much of an impact as you can, you are not interested in politics. You are interested in having an opinion on the internet. Mm. And I'm not interested in just having an opinion on the internet. I want my opinions to be reflected, like within my social group, within electoral politics, within commentary and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just trying to be honest about that fact.
And you're basically suggesting that you're vocalizing what's going through people's heads in this space, which is there's a friendship component to it, but there's also being clear, like a career and political outcome component as well.
I'm sure talking to Sam Cedar and Crystal Ball and Kyle Kalinske is probably fun on a personal level. I'm sure it's also potentially beneficial to your career. And I'm sure that if they did something schizophrenic or crazy or their personal lives imploded, you're going to have a calculation in your mind is how much of a friend are they? How much of a professional peer are they? How am I going to continue my relationship with them? And I think that's actually just like a very normal series of thoughts.
Yeah, I think that people will often confuse and conflate like someone's standards for holding someone as a friend or interacting with someone or collaborating as coextensive with whether you think that they're a good or like worse person in general. Like I think that people's
association is an endorsement.
Right.
Yeah. That's the way a lot of people look at it, but I don't think I've ever had relationships that way.
Yeah, and the truth is can cut both ways. Like it could be the case that someone who's a good person, you just can't have a working or personal relationship with them for personal reasons. But someone who's a worse person than that good person, you could, right? Like I could imagine. I think it's the people who actively support Trump are worse people, overall in terms of their net outcomes on society than some liberal or left creator. But let's say that you're the person that the liberal left creator that you're going to work with, I don't know, like stole from your mom one time. On net, maybe it's the case that this liberal is a better person than the right winger, but you just for personal reasons don't work with that person on the left anymore, or for some other standard. So I think that there's oftentimes this conflation between whether someone is a good person and the standard for personal relationship collaboration, which I think are different. They're not necessarily coextensive. One might feed into the other, but they're not 100% the same.
Well, and I might be self-sweeping a little bit, but I promise you it's not conscious. The only point that I'm trying to make is that like association is an endorsement. Like I expect that within the next like 3 to 6 months, Pisco and I will have something that we will disagree on. We will get into a call. We will rip each other to fucking shreds, and then we'll give it a few weeks before we talk again, or however long is necessary. I expect that within the next 3 to 6 months. But so just because Pisco and I can have a peaceable conversation doesn't mean I endorse every single one of his policy or political prescriptions or individual prescriptions. The same way that I'm actually sure Pisco would disavow a healthy chunk of my perspectives on the world.
Your tendencies.
Yeah.
I think you would be in favor
association
of
is not
Mexico.
endorsement.
You know what? Come to think of it, how are you mad at these people bombing ships in the Gulf of America or whatever when you're in favor of invading Central America?
Yeah, because so I've thought about this a lot, and I'm really not trying to LARP too hard, but plata or plomo is a phrase that's associated with narco cartels, and it's silver or lead. And so I think to myself, like, if you just flat out invade Mexico, let's say that we just take U.S. troops, we march them into Mexico, we take over the area, you say, you're going to live the way that America wants you to live now. Well, then at that point, what's going to happen is just on reflexive anti-North American sentiment, you're going to have running gun battles with vast swaths of the population, and the cartels are going to become like Robin Hood style heroes. And the cartels will probably have a groundswell of support from the local population. Whereas if you kind of have a silver or lead strategy, which is, unironically, this is how I would do it, is I would go to the most powerful cartels and I would say, hey, you're engaged in mass drug production. We understand that you're wildly powerful. We will allow you to remain billionaires, but you need to become a part of the system or we're going to kill you. And so what we would do is we would set like a minimum trade production per year that I would say would like correlate with medical necessity of the globe. So for instance, like when it comes to opium, opium is obviously something that we use in narcotics for pain treatment. When it comes to cocaine, we do use it for local anesthetic. I'm sure it also has some other medical uses that I'm unaware of. But what we would do is we would set a minimum production standard where these people would still be billionaires. But then at that point, they have to become a part of the legitimate government. And if they're not a part of the legitimate government, they continue to run a black market, then you have special forces operations that hunt these people down.
So you're basically saying it would be part of a larger strategy of, I don't know what to call it, global empathy and global support. So it's much more of a globalist mindset in a way, because you're basically trying to solve problems of like foreign countries for the benefit of those people. And so is what you're suggesting that the way Trump is going about it isn't including these peaceful overtures, or is just not in line with your overall scheme, which presupposes some amount of care, genuine care for the lives and conditions of other people, our neighbors?
Well, I think it's also just technocratically incompetent. I think he's effectively slapping a Band-Aid onto a gunshot wound. That's what he's doing. And so if you actually wanted to reduce drug trafficking into the United States, the second that we stop bombing, the second that we have a more normal administration, drug trafficking is going back the way to, the way that it was before. The second that Trump's out of office, if we get like construction and agricultural price shocks, even if the president is JD Vance, I expect a more porous border, or I expect a more open immigration policy.
And you want it to be done the right way with approval by Congress, right? I'm assuming you don't want the president to unilaterally. Okay.
Yeah, of course. And so, when I say like invading Central and South America, I'm not actually talking about like a military invasion of the United States in order to impose our will. I'm effectively talking about like nation building, kind of similar to the way that we did in Japan and Germany, and
Iraq,
also Iraq, Afghanistan. Yeah. But with willing partners on the ground with co-aligned goals that actually make sense.
Right. So like you basically say, in conjunction with allies in Mexico and all those other countries, you wouldn't be in favor of like unilateral action to the extent that like Trump is doing it, where he's kind of fucking over potential allies in the
I think it should
region.
I think it should be voluntary. Of course, like diplomatic and economic pressure, but I think it should be voluntary. And I also think that people would be shocked at what competent non-corrupt infantry aligned with competent air support. I think they would be surprised at what they can do. And what I mean by that is just that there's obviously plenty of people who know how to fight in Central and South America. That's actually part of the problem, is that there's so many people who know how to fight. But if you had everybody like aligned towards a pro-social vision of what the Americas could be, then I think that finding indigenous folks who were willing to fight for that vision, I think would actually be, maybe I'm being naive, but I think that finding willing partners would actually probably be pretty easy.
Well, I want to end on this. So first of all, I don't agree that we should do anything without the consent of the people of the country. And I think that I heard you say that you would want to get that consent, and you'd want to make sure that it was done in coordination. So to the extent that happens, I guess if people are requesting Americanisms, I'd be in favor of that. But I am glad that you have an explanation for why you're against the Trump stuff, but you're able to maintain your position. Last thing I want to end on. The following are topics that I think the Democrats, if you're a debater in this sphere, I recommend you to push on. These are, I think, the most fruitful debate topics, and I want your take on them. I think Epstein is number one on the list of areas where the Trump debater does have any leg to stand on. Number two, I honestly think it's some of these recent corruption scandals related to the prosecution of Comey and Tom Homan, or the non-prosecution Tom Homan, Mayor Adams. I think that those are areas where not a lot of great responses on what's going on there. And then finally, I think it's what you touched on, the crypto stuff, the self-enrichment related to the various different Qatar deals, the various different, the plane, obviously, and then all the money that's being obtained by these extractive deals in other countries. So yeah, give me your take on those, and what are your pet issues, and to what extent do they overlap?
No, I think Epstein's number one, because and what happens too, because the counter argument is, oh, well, Bill Gates and Bill Clinton are in the Epstein files as well. And then the counter argument to that's super easy is, well, if they're criminals, then they should get burned. And I've seen plenty of Democrats who
willing
are
to say this, yes.
Yeah, willing to bite that bullet. They're like, oh, Bill Clinton's in there? Who gives a fuck? Prosecute them all. So that is where I think that Epstein is probably the strongest.
And the cover up too. And it's not just even the substance there. It's the cover up. Now here, when I say cover up, I just mean the Republicans' intransigence, like what Mike Johnson is doing in the House, like closing the House, not swearing in this Democratic member from Arizona. Trump basically saying it's over, nothing to see here, folks. We're not releasing anything more. So it's not just the substance there; it's also how sketchy they're being.
I think the reason why this bites so hard is because every libertarian or conservatarian over the past half decade to a decade has been braying about the Epstein files and pedophilia and feeding pedophiles to wood chippers and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that getting consensus on the fact that they should, like, the unredacted logs that are actually criminal should be released. I think you'll not only will you have broad consensus, but anybody who's fighting you is basically coping, and they'll give up pretty quickly. So I think Epstein is the strongest. The second strongest, I think, is the financial corruption, because they can bring up Hunter Biden, but then I think it's so easy. I know human beings are bad at scale, but if they bring up Hunter Biden, you can just be like, okay, there was allegations of, financial mismanagement over the course of a decade that resulted in $11 million. However, Donald Trump and his family have doubled their net worth from like 4.5 billion to 8 to 9 within the past year.
And that's even just accepting all the allegations as fact for the Hunter Biden narrative, which I would strongly contest.
Right, which you don't have to. You could say, hey, you could basically say, argumentatively, from my opinion, you could say, if you want to get into Hunter Biden details, we could fight on that because I think you're dead wrong about it. But even if I was to accept your perspective on Hunter Biden, how is this not a factor of what? So a billion, I can't even do the math. What is it, like 100, 400? Like, I don't even know the math on how bad it is. But it's like, it's an insane factor.
It's so crazy that these kind of narratives, I don't know if it's crazy, I find it notable that the narratives that you're talking about, that we're both talking about as the easiest to fight on, don't relate to the issues that American people care the most about, right? Like, I guess those would be like tariffs and healthcare prices, right? But like, we don't talk about that stuff because it's a little bit of a drag to like, oh, let's talk about tariffs or healthcare prices, even though that's what American people care about.
The cost of bananas and avocados, that'll get chat real excited.
So even though like that's the issues that American people like vote on more than the other issues, it's not the issues that we most first want to tackle. They're kind of like auxiliary arguments that we deploy after we talk about the corruption. And in addition to all this corruption, look at how much money we're wasting in tariffs, this and that, healthcare costs and all that. So I just find that interesting. I don't know if you have a take on that.
Argumentatively, though, I do think that Democrats, weirdly enough, so I'm still trying to fight for the soul of the right as much as I can. It's probably a fool's errand, but I'm dedicated to doing it for a while. I think that the easiest argument from Democrats, by the way, is look at how Democrats technocratically led over the past 2 decades. They were not the people, even though Hillary Clinton voted for the Iraq war, she wasn't the person leading the charge. That was George W. Bush. When it comes to Obama, he did a pretty good technocratic balance of getting us out of the Middle East and North Africa while still keeping a decent security position. When it comes to Biden, what do you have? Like, they don't even know what to complain about except for COVID. But Donald Trump presided over half of COVID, and all of the things that they complain about Biden with, Trump did arguably worse.
Yeah.
And so for me, like deficit spending, dude, any fiscal conservative should be eating.
Big beautiful.
I won't finish that sentence.
Yeah.
They should be terms of servicing over the fact that Democrats have run better budgets consistently for the past 20 years than Republicans have.
Yeah, no,
that's insane.
All that stuff is true. There's so much to go off. And I had this one debate with this Tim Pool audience member who I call, like, we had a Discord call after her appearance on Tim Pool about the big, beautiful bill. They don't know shit about this stuff, but for whatever reason, those issues, prices, inflation, tariffs, healthcare stuff, fiscal responsibility, people don't actually view those as the biggest vulnerabilities to talk about, even though they should be. Another one that is like the foreign stuff.
It's rhetoric, not policy.
The foreign policy stuff as well, I put in that category. On Afghanistan, like, Trump is legit saying we should never have pulled out of Afghanistan. He's wanted a permanent military position in Bagram Air Base, which
I know, but then everybody just goes, that's Trump. He's just being crazy.
That's like the ultimate Trump card. Sorry to use that phrase. The ultimate Trump card is whenever there's some bad fact or whatever, that's just Trump being Trump. So whether that's building the casinos in Gaza.
Crazy today. Don't worry about it.
Oh, final thing. Oh, sorry, you respond to that.
Well, there was the third one. The third one, though, just real quick. What it was like Epstein, it was financial corruption, and then I was saying that. What was the third one? The third one.
Oh, for me, it was so the one that you missed. You put 2, my 3 The one you missed was like the abuse of the DOJ, Tom Homan, James Comey.
Abuse of DOJ.
Yeah.
So I think with the abuse of DOJ, I think that you can argue it. But what's going to happen is, again, I need to know which one is a Mott and which one's a Bailey. I forget which one. But whatever is the weakest one, you're just going to run into a series of the weaker ones where they're going to go, oh, well, they perp walked Roger Stone.
Butter emails.
They raided Rudy Giuliani's house, and they did this and they did that, and turnabout is fair play. And so for me, the top two, I feel are like just like solid. They have almost no response. The third one, I feel like they're just going to do the eternal. I'm going to look up what a Mott and Bailey is before we leave. Sure. That way I can. But sorry, you were saying last thing, even though we've said last thing half a dozen times.
The arguments, I think, don't ever work well when you're engaged in these discussions.
Foreign policy, like you said a second ago.
That's one.
Talk to a MAGA person about 14 million dead people from USAID. Talk to 3 million dead from HIV in Africa. Talk to them about tens of thousands of people dead in Ukraine. They don't give a fuck. They actually cannot conceptualize human beings on the other side of the planet suffering as a result of Donald Trump's actions. It doesn't exist to them. You might as well be talking about Narnia. It has no effect.
No doubt there. The one thing I was going to say is like where it just, at this point, I've even like stopped arguing about it. Maybe that's a mistake, but I don't know, is the character stuff. The character stuff related to Trump. Here I'm thinking, for example, most recently, him releasing the AI videos of him shitting on Harry Sisson and all those Democrats, him doing the med-bay stuff.
It's wasted energy.
Where he's
it doesn't
like
do
cognitively
anything.
declined and stuff. It's just like not worth time because these people just don't give a fuck if he's like a scoundrel, decrepit old guy whose mind is broken. No. They just, it doesn't matter.
No, I wish I could teleport with a smartphone with that TikTok from Donald Trump being president, and I wish I could show it to my parents
in 2015.
I wish I could show it to my parents in 1998 because they would lose their fucking minds. They would absolutely lose their fucking minds if they saw that. But yeah, we're just in fucked up times. And by the way, damn, I Googled it and then I fucked it up again. But I'm 99% sure
the position that
it's a Bailey.
Yeah.
The Bailey is the weaker position.
One. Yeah, I think that's right.
So the endless Bailey tactic is, in my opinion, where you're arguing with somebody and they just throw up endless weak arguments to move you from argument to argument to argument to argument without actually conceding anything as you bust through.